All right. I'm here with Dale Allen Hoffman, my friend. Great to be with you. Thanks for being. And why don't we, I was thinking I haven't never really asked you, you were on the podcast before, but I don't believe I asked you kind of your foundational story. Like, what brought you on this path? I know you grew up in South Jersey, not too far from me. I grew up in South Eastern Pennsylvania on the other side of Philly. But yeah, tell us about your upbringing and what brought you on the path you're on and how you got started on this path.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we grew up on either sides of Philly. I was
Hmm.
also on the other side of the river, but
Hmm.
um, it started when I was 7. When I was 7 years old, this would have been 1979. It was this interesting year for me where so much was happening all at once without going into too much of the detail. But I mean, um, you know, it was the kind of the burgeoning of what was called the Satanic Panic, which hit New Jersey harder than any other state. It was this time when all these like sacrificial cults and things were being like brought into the light in the news. I don't know if, a lot of people weren't aware of that stuff, but I was living on the edge of the Pine Barrens, Jersey Devil and all that. And there was like all this wild stuff going on around us, sacrificial cults and like finding bodies in the Pine Barrens from mafia hits from like 80 years prior, all this weird stuff. And at the same time, in my house, you know, long story short, I'm being basically, sexually assaulted repeatedly. Um, my sister was, my cousin who stayed with us for a while, she was. My parents split up. My mom marries an alcoholic. It's like, see, you're not expecting this story, and just started spending basically sun up to sundown in the woods, out in the forest, barefoot. My mom would say, "You gotta wear shoes." Okay, so I'd ditch them by the skunk weed, and there was this little sort of, they call it a culvert, like a tunnel under the road between our place and the farm across the street, the Stratton's farm, and a stream went through it. And I would sit in this tunnel and just whoa, make really cool sounds. The ridges would basically give me like dozens of voices that were coming back at me, and I'd kind of lose sense of which one was me. And then I'd go walk out into the woods behind the county jail. Funny enough, it's all roped off now because it's dangerous. All the places I played as a kid are dangerous.
Yep.
Um, and I would just spend hours and hours out there. I was, as weird as it might be for some people, encountering what I would just say light beings, nature beings. I was having these really profound things happening, like with animals showing up in really wild ways and like these like soul connections. And then at the same time, it's like I remember that summer, it was during this vacation Bible school that I did at a Methodist church that we went to. And I remember laying 5 Bibles next to each other on the floor in my grandmother's living room. And right above was that typical picture that everybody had in the 70s and 80s of California surfer Jesus, like looking up toward the light. And everybody had it at that time. I think they sold it at Kmart for like $2 or something. And I remember asking her, I'm like, I'm really confused here. It's like everybody tells me this is the word of God. Well, then how come I was looking at the Gospel of Matthew where it talks about, lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, kind of looking at the Beatitudes a little. I'm like, why are all these so different? And she's like, well, you got to take that on faith. And I'm like, well, what does faith mean? And she said, well, faith will develop in time through faith. And I went, uh, and I remember going to my minister and asking him, and he gave me the exact same reply. So I realized she had gotten that from him. I don't know, there was something in the Bible that I realized I was experiencing. I was even seeing light sometimes. I talk about it in my book, Echoes of an Ancient Dream, where in vacation Bible school, I'm 7 years old. I remember hovering my hand over the page because I saw this light. It wasn't a physical light, it was like this light and layers of different languages in it. but it didn't put off any kind of a heat or anything. And it was just this odd experience for me. Like, while it felt on some, like my childhood wasn't awful, just crazy things were happening. And it was almost like I was not reaching for something. I think that the gift of the chaos of the backstory of my childhood required that I had to let go. Like, I wasn't reaching for something to hold on to for some reason. It's kind of like things were spinning like this so much that I just kind of, on faith, just let go. And the world itself kind of spun away from me. I've never really put it that way. And all of a sudden, this stuff started coming up from inside of me. And I mean, that was when I was 7. When I was 14, I was what I call riffing on the words of Jesus, where it's right here on my bookshelf. It was a King James Bible, which is very different from the 1611 King James, which is very different from the New King James, which is very different from, but it had Jesus's words in red. And I was just obsessive. I read the Bible back to back starting when I was 7. But by the time I was 14, I was just focused in on the Jesus stuff, the red stuff. What everybody else said, I almost didn't care. And I would write like a few lines, and then I would write pages and pages by hand with what I felt it was really saying. And then I remember I started using my sister's electric typewriter, which was like high tech back then. And I didn't write this stuff because I needed somebody to read it. Actually, it didn't even mean anything to me. I just wrote it because I had to get it out of me. And then I started kind of dabbling with Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek in my teen years. But then it was when I was 21, that's when the Aramaic kind of dropped into my lap in such a way that I comprehended it outside of the theology. And I always somehow saw through the theology. Theology is like memorizing Bible verses and all this. All that is, you're living a life of death. You're regurgitating something that's not accurate in the first place, not realizing that the word of God can't be written on a page. It's what grows your fingernails. It's what wakes you up in the middle of the night it's the presence in the room when a baby is born. That's the word of God. And yet somehow when I was a kid, I was picking that up on so many levels, and I couldn't talk to most of my friends. Actually, my best friend in high school, if I mentioned Jesus or the Bible, would start going like this, like fake vomiting thing. So I just kind of kept it to myself, and I kept going. It was like something told me I wasn't going to find the answers in the world, for lack of a better, phrase. And I just kept going with it on the side of normal jobs. And then there was just a particular point where I just dove into this head first, even with a young family. And this is all I've done for, I don't know how long it's been. I've been doing this for 40 something years, but I mean, full time has been about 20, I guess. So, yeah.
How do you describe what you're doing?
I think it
Tough one.
changes moment by moment.
I know.
I'm not good with the sound bites because I'm so it's like the same thing. It's just the fluidity of now. But I basically, I feel like I'm shedding light on the pure essence of the earliest versions of the teachings of Yeshua. But in a way, what I'm doing doesn't really have anything to do with Jesus or Christianity. That's just the window I'm using.
Yeah.
And I'm using that window because that's what I was put here for. And I'm also, maybe it's because it's by far the biggest religion on the planet. There's not even a close second. Islam is starting to move in pretty quickly, though. But yeah, the way I tell people usually is I'm cracking Jesus's nuts, meaning that the people that are considered a biblical expert, a theological expert, biblical archaeology, biblical language, I say this with all of the love in my heart. Been living in the South for so long that I say, bless their hearts. I love them all dearly with all of my heart, but they don't have the slightest clue what they're talking about. because they're getting conditioned and indoctrinated by an organization, by a frame that's not accurate in the first place about the actual history of Christianity, the translations, the culture, whatever. And then the better they parrot that back, the more they're considered an expert. But when you actually go off path and you actually study the real history, there's a lot of paradoxes that show up, especially historically. But the thing is, most people, they're okay with theology. They're okay with sort of telling a good story. As long as people feel good and they can get stoned on God, they're okay with it. But with me, it's like the theology is where I start. Meaning, like if someone says to me, like an Aramaic scholar says, okay, Molkuta, that was translated as kingdom, it really meant queendom. I'm like, okay, queendom. So all you're doing is changing the gender. But in truth, the queendom is also, I don't want to go too deep into the linguistics, but Malkuta is a feminine term. What does that mean? It doesn't mean changing it from a boy to a girl. What it means is taking it from something physical, like, you know, I've got a glass of water here. The actual glass itself, in Aramaic terms, would be considered masculine. My perception of it is feminine. I can't show you the feminine experience that I have of it. The feminine is the attitude, it's the experience. So kingdom, Malkuta, is a state of being. It's an experience. It's not a location. It's obviously not a line in the sand. But yet a lot of Aramaic scholars will say, okay, reign, counsel, reign as in R-E-I-G-N, counsel, advise. I'm like, okay, that's theology, but what does that mean? So what do? I study and I study and I burn it down to, okay, so what is it really? It is a state of being where how do you fit reign, counsel, and advise into that? Where the inner GPS, you know, the inner guidance system is wide open. And sorry, you know, this idea in ancient Aramaic of the pinnacle of the temple, where the energy body opens to such a point that it's almost like somebody takes all your volume knobs and turns them to the top. And kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, two very different states of being, but we've all had that experience where you're just one with everything and there's no bounds. And it's like you are more alive than you've ever been, but yet you don't exist as a separate nature or being from this absolute, from this potentiality. And those kinds of moments have nothing to do with kingdom or queendom or lines in the sand or people believing in some kind of versions of teachings. So the whole point for me is I take that nut of theology and I feel like I'm not done until people go like that and they grab their mouth and they just start crying and laughing simultaneously. Well, what's the response? The response is usually to them recognizing what they felt the entire time was what these things really meant on the experiential level. And you can't get there from theology. I could be, you know how I can become a multimillionaire? All I have to do is say, Jesus died for my sins. That whole cultic, pagan, ritualistic human blood sacrifice thing is real. And what all these, you know, sort of televangelists and whatever have been saying, that's all real. I renounce the world. And if I were to kind of get into the sort of, you know, modern white, I want to say specifically white Christian, Southern Baptist evangelical thing, I'd become a millionaire in a couple of months. Because all it is that you're taking these frames, these theological frames, and as long as people feel good, as long as they feel satiated, as long as you're not rocking their boat, as long as you're not, whatever that may be, they can get stoned on God, they'll be fine. And what I'm kind of doing is instead kind of standing at the edge of the boat and rocking it back and forth, not to be incendiary or provocative, but hopefully helping people realize that phrase that I always say, what you're looking for is what is looking, which is St. Francis of Assisi.
Yep.
And when you realize that, oh, and people will say, what you seek is seeking you. And I'm like, that's not what I said. Oh, that, you know, what you're looking for is looking for you. That's not what I said either. I said, what you're looking for is what is looking. So you're just seeking yourself. I'm like, I didn't say that either. It's funny how it works. And I mean, you know that you and I could sit there and we can talk, and then we can just sit there. I mean, you and I'll sit at like a cafe or something and just look at each other and not talk for 5 minutes and then just burst out laughing.
Yeah.
And everybody else is like so locked in the world. I mean, the world is the theology. It's a theory about something rather than a direct experience itself. But when you can just be in that space, sufficient unto this present moment, everything else gets added from that point. And somehow as a kid, I don't know. I don't know why I let go rather than holding on. But you know, all these decades later, it's like, wow, it saved my life, because I would have been dead a very, very long time ago. Not because of a theology that I believe in, just because I didn't fully believe in the world. I just don't.
You're on fire
Completely
right now.
fine, but
You said you talked about how like people will tell, you know, in a lot of Christian circles, they'll tell people what makes them feel good. But what I find is a lot of Christians live in a lot of fear, right? So is that like the true message of Jesus?
of course, it was like, I'm here to scare the piss out of you. It's the only point. It's funny because, you know, there's that phrase that we're told to fear God.
Right.
Fear is an interesting thing. You know, I like the acronym of false evidence appearing real, but I'm going to back up a little. Fear, that word in Aramaic is tidkul, tidkul. What tid is tid or tet is just those two letters together, TD or TT, which is, you know, basically tall dalit or tall. When you put those two together, it means kind of something that creates a dynamo. What a dynamo is a relationship between two things, like a yin yang. It means kind of to divide. When Yeshua said, when he said, do not doubt, what that actually meant in Aramaic was do not divide. Tet plug. You hear the tit plug meant divide. And that's what it is. It's kind of good you fighting bad you, whatever. But tidkul means the kul is all consuming, whole or full. Like when a state of being happens when your energy, you know, this dynamic energy is wide open and firing on all cylinders. And people will say, so we're supposed to fear God. I'm like, no, hold on. Let's put it this way. You've got a little kid and he's playing with a ball in the front yard. The mother's raking leaves or something. And it's like a 15 mile per hour, really slow zone. And a guy comes blasting through the car at 50 miles an hour. And the kid goes running toward his ball, rolling into the middle of the street. And the mother does that superwoman thing that they do. And she leaps 20 feet, grabs the kid back. Now, I say this to people all the time. When does she feel the fear? And people go, oh, after. Well, what did she feel before? What she felt before is how we're supposed to be receptive of God. The cool is that, like I say, the pinnacle of the temple, it's like blowing into a balloon and you almost can't add any more air to it. It feels like it's going to burst. Well, that's these pinnacle experiences. It doesn't mean climbing to the top of a brick tower, although I know that's cute. It's this experience where you're firing on all cylinders for life itself. But what happens is, because all your volume knobs just flew to the top, as your energetic body is starting to come back down, all these corks start rising on the lake, basically. All this junk that's within you, which is the barriers for your conscious awareness of the divine, start rising up. It's like the 98% of the iceberg starts coming out of the darkness. And unfortunately, what the New Age and New Thought and religion is telling us is, as an example, put nice thoughts or misuse affirmations, which is done all the time. Use an affirmation to convince yourself of something that you don't believe you are. Add emotion into it, do backflips with it, put it everywhere, like you're kind of taking a couple of hammers and slamming your skull. And if you do it with enough passion, eventually you'll convince yourself that it's true. And I'm like, that's the exact opposite of how to use an affirmation. Let's throw an affirmation out there. I am As opposed to fear, try this. I am fully loved and supported in all areas of my life. And then actually breathe before. Rise and follow the breath. I am fully loved and supported in all areas of my life. Your energy body is going to start opening. The volume levels are starting to come up. Now, write that down on a piece of paper, physical hand, not typewriter, not computer. Write it down with pen or pencil. Keep breathing and write whatever comes up opposite of that. I have never felt fully loved or supported at any point in my entire life. Keep breathing. Make that statement of declaration again. Keep your breath moving. Write it down again, and then write what comes up. See, an affirmation should be a catalyst to bring into the light, along with conscious breath, bring into the light all those places within ourselves that we block the light, that we block our awareness. But what the New Age and New Thought are doing is trying to convince us, they're trying to like take this like sugary paintbrush and paint all over things to convince ourselves of something. But the truth of the matter is, again, what you're looking for is what is looking. If we could use those as a catalyst, we'd realize that it's really a matter of removing the bushels off of the light. If I gave you a bushel, would you hide, or if I gave you a light, would you hide that below a bushel? The word bushel is an interesting word in Aramaic. It's satah. It's the root of the word satana, which is Satan. And what does that mean? It means to cut something from its source. Like I've got a big basket of cornmeal and I scoop it out and I say, I've got this cornmeal, but then I've got this. And this is separate from that though, but it's not separate. It's like standing beside a mountain and you're looking, oh, look at this huge mountain. And then I pull a rock out of the side of the mountain and I say, this is a rock, that's a mountain. It's like, no, it's all mountain. Or me standing in front of you and we've got 5 feet of space and not recognizing actually that there's air between, there's gases, there's nitrogen, there's oxygen, that there really is no actual space. It's just us believing that somehow in these moments when we're forgetting that we're in a movie theater, we're forgetting the fact that we're watching something projecting on a screen where all the drama is, etc. And the division that happens, a being divided against itself, which is what Satan really means, it's the good me fighting the bad me. It's the places where I say, okay, these feelings and thoughts are not appropriate. These feelings and thoughts are appropriate. And then I set up this system of this internal turmoil that I basically project out onto everybody around me because I'm not able to be conscious with the present moment, regardless of what's happening, because of all these little things that are essentially popping up. And what they're trying to do is kind of convince you to stuff it down. Now, all of this stuff that's floating on the lake, that's floating on the surface, the grit on the lens, that's basically what most modern exoteric Christianity focuses on. It says you're garbage, your lens is dirty, you were born with a dirty lens, there's nothing you can do but accept this guy who we say is the Son of God, hanging on a stick and suffering for your sins, which doesn't even make sense. You have to believe this, again, this cultic, pagan, ritualistic human blood sacrifice. And then when you believe that, you're absolved of your dirty lens. And then, of course, what starts happening is instead of your, the breath level of your life opening, your ego goes like that. Ego, technically in Koine Greek, it was ego, like the waffle. But your ego starts to get really big. And then that's basically what modern Christianity is. It's all ego service.
How about you
Bless their heart. I love them.
Define ego for us.
Well, ego, all it means is individualized self. All modern projections of psychology, even Carl Jung, I adore him, all of it is an add-on to the fact that all ego meant was an individualized self. You can almost call it a safety mechanism. Now, I see people yak about ego death. I'm like, I would love to see your ego death. I would love to see you slobbering on yourself on the floor or walking out in front of moving vehicles. And ego is not a bad thing. It is this sort of You can almost, actually, the perfect words for me are from Sri Aurobindo, The Life Divine. I'm pointing at it on my bookshelf. And he called it a supra-rational enigma. A supra-rational enigma. Yogananda calls it the pseudo-soul, that recognition of the divine play. What's funny, because Yeshua had a name for it. It was ape, which was translated as hypocrite. People don't even know what hypocrite means. What that word meant in Aramaic was persona, which is a Latin word that means mask. The word translated as hypocrite is the word for ego, and it meant your mask. And that was a mask that an actor would wear in a divine play. See, his listeners would have understood this 2,000 years ago. That, oh, it's not every that in which you judge another, you are guilty of practicing. That which you measure to them will actually be measured back to you. Oh, I get it, because it's my mask. An actor would come out in a divine play wearing that mask. The ultimate point of the play was, by the end, the mask would drop and they'd reveal their true nature. So when he would say that to his listeners 2,000 years ago, it wasn't like you had to have this glossary or a lexicon to define hypocrite or anything like that. They would just go, oh, well, of course. You know, it's something you could say to probably a child, as long as they've been to a play or understand that there's a character you play versus the true nature. And there's nothing wrong with the character. And the fun thing about judging the character and turning it into something bad is the part that judges that character, the part that judges the ego is the ego. And the idea of the transcendence of the ego and the idea of ego death, the ego would love to own your ego death. It would love it. And I've transcended, and I've had so many friends living in Asheville for so long who have gone through ego death. And I'm like, you know, if you're talking about it, it's not an ego death.
The clear sign.
Hello, McFly. You know, well, how would I know then? Well, you wouldn't even be talking about it. There would be no frame of reference whatsoever. I'm like, you realize that, but so I have fun with the whole thing, but that some people will hear me that grew up in the Baptist church or the Catholic church, and they'll tell me they're a recovering Baptist or a recovering Catholic. That's their words. I'm just saying them back. And a lot of times they'll literally be feeling full body terrors just listening to me at first, because they literally think they will burn in hell and suffer for eternity. And when you actually try to start telling them, guess what? That hell thing, that's only about 700 years old. That came from Dante Alighieri. It was written in Italian, for actually pre-Italian, you know, Napoli Italian. And it was just a huge dramatic, basically a poem that he wrote. Having been excommunicated from the Catholic Church, having been excommunicated from his the place that he grew up, and he writes this huge thing, and then eventually, after he's dead, the Catholic Church adopts it and starts coming up with these ideas of purgatory, and the inferno and all this stuff, and they attach it onto the Jesus stuff, and they call it the new Catholicism, and none of it was in the Bible. So what is the hell state then? Well, hell in Aramaic, it's funny, if you look in Mark, in the Gospel of Marcus, Mark in Aramaic talks about having two eyes to be cast. Funny, if you look in the NIV, it says thrown into hell in the New International Version of the Bible. It says thrown into hell. Better to have one eye than to have two and be thrown into hell. Well, what's the word in Aramaic? The word was Gehenna. What's Gehenna? That's hell, right? No. Gehenna was this city trash dump on the south side of Jerusalem. It was called the Valley of Ginhanom. And it's not there now. It's actually, I believe, a housing project. But it was the place where they would burn garbage. It's the place where they would send people with mental issues and instabilities. They would close the doors of the walled city of Jerusalem. They didn't want people wandering the streets who didn't live within it. And they would send these people with mental issues, whatever. They would burn the bodies of people who had died and didn't have money for burial there in Gehenna. So what they would have heard is, okay, if you want to act crazy, you're going to get sent down with all the other crazy people, warming yourself by the fires of Gehenna. It was the trash dump. And what is it today? It's hell. It's this burning thing that's not even there. And then you've got Sheol from the Hebrew. The idea of hell in the Jesus teachings, or in the Semitic idea, was any moment of overwhelm where that pseudo soul is essentially overpowering that true nature of our being. We're coming more from, it's not much different than a car out of alignment. Bop, bop, bop. You'll feel it, whether you can recognize it in thought or whatever, you're going to feel it. And when it overpowers and we become incongruent, and then you have these moments where you have a catalytic experience where the energy body opens. And what happens is whatever grit you've got on your lens, just to put it in an easy way, is going to start burning up in that process. Those moments when we feel overwhelmed and our neck is turning red and our face is turning red, and whether it's rage or abject embarrassment, whatever it may be, those hell moments are basically our awareness of our own divinity is gone for that moment in time. Did it go anywhere? No. Do we have to go back to God? No. Do we have to believe in some external death? No, because we never left except here. And when we start realizing, and that's like, I remember before everybody 15 years ago, you got to meet Brian, you got to meet Brian. Maybe it was a little more than 15 years ago. I'm like, not again. People would just come up to me randomly in the store. Have you ever met Brian Piergrossi? And it wasn't like that, but I remember hearing the big glow, and as soon as I heard it, I'm like, okay, I get that. And then like the wow of the now, and I'm like, ooh, I get that too. And it's funny, like we pursue this stuff in the world when the world's not really even there. And yet, again, what we're looking for is, there's this great thing that Wayne misquoted it, Wayne Dyer, but it was a Robert Frost thing. And Wayne would say, we all dance round in a circle and suppose, while the secret sits in the center and knows. But the actual Robert Frost quote was, we all dance around in a ring and suppose, while the secret sits in the middle and knows. And that's it. And then, of course, that whole idea of ego death or ego transcendence or the pursuit for enlightenment, all that stuff just falls away. And so many people are talking about what you and I are now, just like, it's enough of the city. It's enough of this sort of artificial pursuit toward one common dollar or one common country. And I'm like, that's not how we can survive. The way we survive is in these nested pods, almost like little hives that are with, slight bits of government onto wider and wider levels, but not a melting pot of America where you sacrifice the human to melt it into whatever Americans are, but actually more like a salad where we can maintain that cultural identity and toss it up in the air and still have those distinct flavors. And that's not going to happen from this artificial globalization or corporations like Vanguard or BlackRock or anything like that either. That's again, it's another pursuit of this pseudo mask that, again, it's not bad. It's just, you can't live off it. It's like eating the menu, but never getting to the meal. For me, that's the theology, and that's where all the fear-based Christianity is. We're like, here, come eat this menu, eat this book, eat this Bible. Which version, which of thousands of versions is it? Oh, it doesn't matter. This is the one that we feel good with, so this is the one that's correct. It's funny. I don't keep running on, but we did a DNA test for Christmas, Loretta and I found out on one side, my way back grandfather, like 14 levels back, was a German king. And I was like, I didn't even know Germany had king. Was a German king who renounced his crown to follow or to pick up Lutheranism, this like refreshed version of Christianity that Martin Luther represented. That's on one side of that's my mother's father's side. My mother's side, I found out that my whatever grandfather was in the realm of the Church of England, and he was one of those people who, he's got his own Wikipedia page. I cannot remember his name. I'll dig into it eventually. But he was actually overseeing the torture and the murder of people who were caught with Bibles other than the authorized King James edition of the Bible within the realm of the Church of England. And I'm like, well, maybe in my DNA, there's like this teeter-totter thing of trying to find, like I say, the atonement or the at-one-ment between these two, and realizing there's nothing good or bad in either one. It's just an experience that we've had. And while that's easy for me to say, that's a really, it takes a lot of present moment paying attention to get there. And then once you're there, it's so plain that I think if it comes too soon, it's not enough. But when you've kind of had enough of the world and you're ready to go, okay, I'm just going to let go of this, then what would appear to be plain, you actually realize it's dancing and it's alive. And you can sit by a fire and be far more entertained than you could binge watching on a 85-inch TV or whatever the hell I have out here, 65, I think, whatever. You've seen it, actually. We've not binge watched, but we've listened to music on it, and you know. And I think a lot of the world's coming to that place. It's getting tighter. It's going more to the wealthy in a lot of ways. And I'm not, being disparaging necessarily, but at the same time, we're like, so be it. Let's get back together,
Like the intensity of everything that's happening is really the catalyst to wake us up, right?
And of course, in the intensity, the greatest challenge is to see clearly and not bite too much of a hook of appropriate and inappropriate, or good and bad. Shakespeare
Right.
said there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And people will say, okay, so some guy just molested a kid or something, we're not supposed to
That's
do
always the
anything about it.
question you get next.
Yeah, it's like, when did it happens all the time.
I
People
know.
are like, especially on social media. I don't even actually reply to social media comments almost ever, because people throw this thing out that's stupid, that has nothing to do with anything else. But I'm like, okay, it's up. So, well, the difference here is that it doesn't remove accountability,
Mhm.
but that we can bring people to a place of accountability without it also being me making them pay for something that I'm not willing to feel within myself. And it's all smoke and mirrors, it's all echoes, it's all like my favorite part of I was just telling my friend Nia the other day that it's great because I keep getting all the people send me all these Chuck Norris memes, and they're all hilarious. And I'm like, what's cool is that one of her best friends is Chuck Norris, and one of Chuck's best friends was Bruce Lee. So I'm like, I've got a friend who has a friend whose best friend was Bruce Lee, which is just really cool. But at the end of Enter the Dragon, there's this great scene. It's like a 15-minute scene of this fight, this battle in like a hall of mirrors. And it's like you're looking at Bruce and you're like, God, that's it. The guy's right there. And he hits the mirror and there's nobody there. It's just a mirror, But we do that in ourselves, and then we start losing sense of what's real, because we're still looking out here and we're still looking at characters on a screen that's not there. When you realize that you're not the movie on the screen, you're not really even the film strip and the projector, which is what New Thought and New Age is focused on. They're focused on what you think, but you've never had an accurate thought in your life. Every thought you've ever had is nothing but a delusion of a separate mind that's not even there in the first place.
Love it.
So, but because they can measure it on some level, Marcel Vogel was measuring thoughts when he worked for IBM back in the 70s. Because of that, they don't realize that thought has no creative power. Behind of thought is feeling. And when I say feeling, I don't mean emotion. I mean that I usually have bowls all over the place. I think they're in the other room. I can hit a bowl, and that initial sensation of pure frequency. When you walk into a room and before you have thoughts of it's hot, it's cold, I like how it feels, it doesn't, you first walk in and just, there's that place where you're not quite processing yet. And that immediacy, which is interesting because in Aramaic, the word for sudden and the word for silence is the same word, shelia. And it means essentially not silence as in a lack of noise, but silence as in we can live so close to every breath, and so much in between the notes and the space between the words, that the letters and the notes and the words are no longer what's important. What's important is the space. And then whatever notes or words or letters come out of that space, they're now going to be pregnant with that divinity, as opposed to us kind of bashing our head into a computer tower and waiting for all the programs to kind of make us feel alive and wake us up and give us enlightenment. It just doesn't work that way. And, you know, I'm not necessarily bashing religion, but funny that religion, the word in Latin is religio. It actually means to reveal the ligaments.
Mm.
It meant revelation and or awareness, which is what revelation means, an unveiling where one reveals how everything is threaded together and connected together. And when you start getting to that kind of a place, it's like the world doesn't have as much pull. Or you can go another way and just fight the world. Like people that, it's nothing wrong with having 1,000 bumper stickers in your car, but sometimes it's like paranoid schizophrenic looking at the back of a car in Asheville. It's like, which one of these thoughts how fully are you into all these different thoughts? This one's way over here, this one's way over here, and I'm like, you know, it's understanding a sacred, which is what me and my work, people can come and post something about something that I do or a translation, and then I'll see all these like sort of social media experts that read one book, so they're now, you know, a PhD, pilot higher and deeper in BS, you know, because they read one book about Aramaic or something. And I just sit back, I don't comment on these things, but I literally laid my life down in devotion for, not for Jesus in that sense, not for Christianity in the sense of something that judges and projects fear, but realizing what he was actually trying to do was not give us all this stuff to adopt. He was helping us let go. It was always that theme of letting go and being open. What did he say before most of the healings? Be open. What did he say after? I didn't heal you. You did this. You did this. And what did you do? Your faith has made you whole. In Aramaic, ha'imanutak achayatak, it's basically saying you just realized you were never sick.
Mm.
You bought the illusion. You bought the mask. So I didn't heal you. And then people say, well, what about him spitting in the ground and rubbing it in the blind man's eyes? I'm like, that's pomp and circumstance for everybody watching, you know? And then what's the next thing he says? Don't go home. Don't go to your village. He would say, go out into the desert. Just go somewhere away from your normal core of people, because the first thing, well-intentioned as they may be, they're going to do is try to cut down your healing, so to speak.
Got to put your mask back on you.
Oh, absolutely. Because if your mask is off, then that makes theirs a lot more freaking obvious. So, you know, and when you start doing that, it's like, whoa, and realizing, like the modern idea of prayer, a lot of people will beckon for something and they're asking for something. I'm like, well, okay, here, let's look at this. You know, Jesus never told us to ask for anything ever. And they're like, it's all over the Bible. I'm like, you have crappy translations. As a matter of fact, he told us to never do that, especially in public, in that sense, to always do it in your closet. That word closet is tawana in Aramaic. It means the inner sanctum, the inner room. It means regardless of what you, like, people don't even know what they don't even realize that they don't even believe what they think they believe, because what you think is not what you believe. What you believe is how you feel, which is prior to thought. Feeling, if focused upon pro or negative, it will ultimately crystallize into a thought that we can now kind of look at in the psyche. But the truth of the matter is that's not where the seat of creative power is. Creative power is on the level of feeling. And the more open and crystalline we can allow that feeling to be, the more open and crystalline our life will be. The more we grab onto all the thoughts, all these little projections of the mask, again, it's not bad, but you're going to reap what you sow in that sense. One little tiny mustard seed can turn into this whoosh, just from trying not to think one little thought about how you can't stand how that guy makes a ticking sound or whatever. People have like all their things that they do, and it'll drive you insane when you're grabbing at the world. But when you come back, like as an example, people say to me all the time, they're like, how do I pray for someone's healing? I'm like, okay, do you know what the word manifest means? And they'll say, yeah, it means bring into being. I'm like, no, it doesn't. They're like, well, it means to create. I'm like, it has nothing to do with that. And they're like, no, no. And they throw all this secret or all this modern junk out there. And I'm like, manifest from Latin, manus festus. Manus means hand. Festus means obvious. It means as obvious as my hand. Colloquially, it just means obvious. So you hear manifest destiny. What does that mean? Obvious destiny. It's the obvious destiny of white Euro-Americans to plow over the indigenous peoples of the Americas. That was obvious. No, it's not obvious. That's called bravado. But so I say to people, if you're praying for healing, you can say in the name of Lord Jesus all you want, but his name wasn't Jesus. And the word name, John 15:16, doesn't mean name as in Michael Jackson. It means, what are you feeling when I say Michael Jackson? What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? The totality of his essence is energy. But if you're praying for healing, what's obvious to you? People go, well, that I want healing. And I'm like, no, what are you actually manifesting? Okay, let's look at it this way. I'll say, if you tell me you're attracting a car, what's obvious to you? And then they'll go, oh my God, I don't have a car. I'm like, bingo. Every single thing that you state as a declaration of attraction is an affirmation of its lack. Every single, beckoning for healing is an affirmation of disease. What's obvious? So then they go, okay, hold on. So what do I do then? How do I really pray for someone's healing? I'm like, don't. State as a declaration, as an affirmation, a gratitude and an awareness for their radiant health and joyous spirits. And then when anything unlike that pops in, just like I was talking about writing the affirmations down earlier, be aware of that, recognize it, and breathe through it. Well, what do you mean breathe through it? Well, what's going to happen is and I had to do this with my mother's cancer. She passed in 2007. To be able to really see her clearly, it's a matter of me breathing. And when I started going, oh my God, well, she could die from this. She's suffering. She was covered in softball-sized tumors. I got up in the bed in the nursing home and was just holding her in my arms and toning with her and praying and affirmation in that sense. I'm like, whatever is in you that is anything less than divine love, purity, radiant health, breathe through it. Let yourself feel it. You'll get burning here. You'll get burning. It's like a cradle, almost like a mask that goes around your face. You got to breathe through that and continue and continue. When you can see that person or yourself only in radiant health and joyous spirits, then keep yourself in that state of being, allow the energy body to open, and that's your true prayer. Because if you're praying for healing in the world, or if you're praying for the end of war, what you're actually praying for is war. People don't get that part. They don't realize they're kind of grabbing at things in the mask or in the world that aren't even there to find purpose and meaning, when what they're grabbing at isn't even what's real. What's real is what's looking. Well, what does that mean? It means this. That's Christ. Christ isn't something you put on like the Apostle Paul says. Christ is what happens when everything's taken off.
So the teachings of Jesus are really about us, and I would say the presence of Christ, right? Yeshua, are about us realizing our true nature.
And it's funny, all the time that, I don't want to say wasted, but all the books about all the theology and all these things that, I'm sorry, so much of it is just made up, when the whole time you can just read it in the most innate, go buy a children's Bible. That's what really got me going as a kid. And I didn't mention that the thing that made me really want to lay those Bibles next to each other as a kid wasn't just Vacation Bible School. I would go in Marlton, New Jersey, I would go to my dentist. and my orthodontist, and they would have the children's Bible, and it had like 3,000 mail-in cards in the back where you can mail in and get your own. Only like 800 payments of $99.99 to get your one book or whatever it was. And I would flip through that thing, and my mom eventually got me one. And I was just fascinated by looking at it almost like a comic,
Hmm.
looking at the Bible just like in stories,
Hmm.
which is interesting because this Saturday I'm doing a Zoom event called Casting the Net, all about the parables of Yeshua. But just looking at it on that level, and I'm like, just even as a kid, I think I don't know why I saw things differently. It's not just because of there was trauma in my life. Um, Really, it's a huge gift in a lot of ways. And and to just be aware of the rise and fall of my breath. And people are like, well, how long did it take you before you didn't have to remind yourself in a movie theater or during violence or something like that? I'm like, do you want the real truth, or you just want the cookie cutter answer? They're like, give me the real truth. I'm like, okay. It was like, it was at least 20 years of constantly reminding myself to breathe before, like, if I'm watching a film or something starts going on and like a fight breaks out, it's been a while since I've had to go, hey, Dale, breathe. Because the first thing we do is we mechanically stop breathing. If someone pulls out in front of you on the road, or you find out somebody you love was tragically killed, the first thing you do is breathe, stop breathing. Well, funny that word breath in Latin was spiritus, and that's what spirit is. It's inspiration. It means breath. And if you take that back to the Aramaic, what it means is oscillation or frequency. And it means breath, it means wind, it means heartbeat, it means drumbeat, it means magnetism, it means what we feel from the heat of the sun, not the heat itself, but the pressure essentially that we feel. It's all the word spirit or breath in Aramaic is ruha. And what's beautiful about that, then what does that really mean? What it really means is that, what does it mean to be more spiritual? It means essentially to be aware of movement. Funny because you and I went through this deep conversation 10 years ago where we were like, fuck spirit, stop using the word everything spiritual. And then we started going kind of like, all right, hold on, let's keep going with this. Let's keep going with it. And it's like, wait a second, rather than throwing the word out, let's be aware of what it actually is. And it's amazing to just stop. I'm so glad my air conditioner's not running outside the office window right now. It really would have you wouldn't hear it, but I sure would. I just hear birds. I hear cars, but see, we're in this pursuit to find something else to let us be spiritual when it's all right here. And that alone, just that alone, that's the death of the guy on the cross. It has nothing to do with anybody outside of you. It's just that the veil of the temple, where's the temple? Right here. The word veil, as a matter of fact, is the word ape, which is the word translated as hypocrite. It also means veil. The veil of the temple, a purple curtain in the doorway of the church. Well, if you're looking outside of you, yes. What did he really mean by that? I believe he was talking about this, that pseudo soul. That's all that needs to die. But the funny thing about it dying is if you kill it, it's it killing itself. It's really just having a healthy relationship with it, not really the killing part.
Hmm. That's what I was going to ask you about. I'd love to hear you talk more about the illusionary nature of the world, right? So that can get tricky. Um, what exactly, like, talk more about that, and what is the proper relationship with this dream that we're in, or the illusionary nature? First off, most people think it's real. They think it's very real, right? There's a materialistic, their spirituality would be like a kind of materialism or scientism. So it's like transcending that, but then people can go too far in the non-dual, I find, or it's like, this is all fucking illusion. I can do whatever I want. So what is the proper relationship with this seemingly world that we're in, or of
I don't know if I
duality?
would be so bold as to like throw out the proper relationship, but meaning to state what I'm so sure that it is. I think I know a lot of what it's not. funny that like when Yeshua said you cannot serve God and mammon, people always say it's money. And I'm like, well, it's kind of funny. Like Les Brown, my original inspiration as a speaker, he was the reason I went, damn, I want to do that. Although I'm not really into the speaking thing so much anymore. But he's like, everybody says money is the root of all evil, but they all want to find out for themselves. Mammon doesn't mean money. It can be an example of it. Mammon in Aramaic means materiality. It means to believe what your brain is telling you is what's real, your intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't serve that and God. What is God? First of all, the God of the Old Testament is anthropomorphized, guilt, fear, shame, total and complete. And I'm not saying all of the Old Testament, but a large chunk. The God Yeshua was speaking of was not the same God. He was speaking of Allah. Allah means absolute only being. So that means that
is that where the Islamic term Allah, does it come from?
Yes,
that?
Allah
Okay.
came directly from Aramaic.
Okay.
It's funny. It's a joke, but not really. I say if you want to learn a lot of Arabic, learn Aramaic and drop the laugh at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like Allah, Allaha, Ruha is Ruch, Nafsha is Nafs. In Arabic, it just drops the ha's or the ahs at the end.
So the absolute being.
What's that?
You said it's God is the absolute being. Is that what you said?
The absolute undivided.
Yeah.
So, and there's a phrase that I heard Deepak say maybe 20, 30 years ago now. And I remember I only ever met him once, just a little guy. And I remember I both were barefoot. Like I watched him take his shoes off at a Barnes and Noble in Florida. And he kept walking up and he would like touch his toe to mine, which, on some level, maybe that looks creepy, but I think he just knew I was like really into it. This has gotta be, this is 31 years ago. But I remember him, it was like a prosperity book, Spiritual Laws of Success or something. But I remember him, I'm looking really deep in his eyes and he's right in front of me. And I remember him saying the phrase pure potentiality. And my consciousness just went, and I don't think I heard anything for like another 10 minutes because I was just like, pure potentiality, pure potentiality. And I know we're just hammering at things with words, but when you speak of scientism, it's funny that science now is, especially just in the last 6 months, is confirming that none of this is real. Yep. And it's happening on a weekly basis and NASA has a lot to do with it, but a lot of people don't realize how much NASA has their fingers into all these different places of consciousness. They think it's all about sending things into space. But another phrase that goes along with God and mammon is, the love of, or money is the root of all evil, which isn't true. It's the love of money. But that word money is an interesting word in Aramaic. This was from 1 John, I believe, in Aramaic. That word is kespa. So what kespa means in Aramaic, translated as money, is the belief in the illusion of a rate of exchange. The belief in the illusion of a rate of exchange, meaning that I can give you something, whether it's a possession or even a thought or a belief. I can give you something that now you feel that you are more than you were before you got it. Or I can take something from you. Like a lot of the women, the battered women that I work with, their problem isn't really, and not that that's, positive. Their problem is rarely when the husband or boyfriend's hand would fly across their face. Their problem is usually with all the mental things that were done to them and people being able to give someone the feeling that their self-worth has now been flushed down the toilet. And that's this idea. And what is that really that's happening? It's forgetting, hey, wait a second here. You are divine. What you're looking at is you're this character on a screen. And funny that, the love of this kind of gains and losses in the world that doesn't exist, that's what's evil. But then wait a second. Modern people don't know what evil means. Evil in Aramaic is bisha, which means not fertile now. Some theologians will say it just means rotten. And I'm like, wait, no. Ripe would mean fertile now, wide open now. When Yeshua said, I have seed, and if I throw it on ripe soil, basically it's going to grow like wildfire. If I throw it on evil soil, what does that mean? That's like a stone green banana, or a banana that's black and oily and covered in flies. Either one of those is really what evil meant. It meant it's either too early or too late for fertile consumption. What is that really saying? It's telling you evil is believing what's going on up here, that you're grabbing onto some kind of thought system, intellectual frame in the ego that's not actually there, and allowing that to supersede your awareness in the present moment. And then what happens is, and what is paranoid schizophrenia? Funny. What, well, even go clearer than that. What is the actual definition of insanity is to do the same thing repeatedly, expecting a different result every time. And I've been in those kinds of homes where you can watch the guy doing the same movement, doing the same movement, doing the same movement, doing the same movement. And you're told he's been doing it for 25 years of moving the pencil from here to here, thinking it's going to go back to there. And that's all he does 24 hours, or at least whenever he's awake, he's just moving just moving the pencil, waiting for it to move. And the truth of the matter is, what we're seeking is exactly what you say. It's our true nature, but we're trying to build this pseudo nature all around it. And that doesn't just include our beliefs. That includes fancy buildings. Not that there's something wrong with it. It includes I mean, I love it when I see someone like Melinda Gates or Jeff Bezos's ex, and they get their huge payoff in the marriage, and then they just start giving billions of dollars away. I love seeing that. There's nothing wrong with wealth, but when it's all piled in one place with this illusion that it is a seat of power that's giving all these people employment, unfortunately, behind that is some kind of an egoic construct. As Eckhart Tolle said, he was walking through a meditation center in California, and he comes up on this sign on this building that's falling sideways, and it said, "Caution, all structures are unstable." It's like,
yeah,
it's nice. It's perfect.
yeah.
But the idea of, for me, it's just the realization again that he wasn't really giving us things to add on, especially not in Aramaic, or even a lot of cases in Koine Greek. He was showing us how to peel things off.
Mm-hmm.
That was really it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and you can even look at an idea like the word anana in Aramaic, when it's like, I am the breath, or I am the bread of life, or I am the light of the world, people will say, oh, well, he was talking about himself. It's like when you look in Koine Greek, it's ego eimi, which is I am. If you look at it in Aramaic, it's I, like in Rastafarianism. Bob Marley, oh pirates, yes, they rob, I took I. And that's because Ge'ez and Amharic and Ethiopic languages all come from Aramaic, and they preserved the I, that Christianity couldn't. Because what it meant was not I, Jesus, am the light of the world. He would say Ana Nuhra Dalma if he was saying that. But he didn't. He said Ana Nuhra Dalma. Not I, Jesus, am the light of the world, but the I within the I behind the I is the light of the world. Because the I behind my eye is the I behind your eye. So rather than using the world to light itself, which doesn't work, there is no such thing, realizing that your light shines through the world and it's in it, but not of it.
Beautiful. I've been looking at in the Bible, it says, do not worship false idols. And yeah,
there they are.
or don't put any other gods above the true God, which I love your definition, the undivided
absolute only being.
Yeah. So I think I would say, if I look at kind of mainstream culture, our God is really technological progress. And I think more people are waking up to like, this isn't making us happier. This isn't making us more fulfilling. This is a false
It's
god.
quite a drug. This is quite a drug. So is this even. I mean, we're
Yeah.
having, but we're using this very mindfully right now.
Right.
So, but,
Yeah.
so there's the difference between that and the drug, you know? Um, yeah,
No, I think the problem if it's a tool, you can use it for something positive and creative, right? But I think the problem comes when you literally make it the God. Like this is what you worship, above the real God and the true God.
yeah, the graven image is anything that supersedes now.
Yeah.
Any thought system, idea, formation of a separate mind that's more important than now. And it's funny, like, you know, we took our daughter Shemaya turned 13 yesterday, and we took her out to lunch with her friend. And I'm looking around the restaurant, and there's all these couples at these tables, and they're all like looking at their phones.
I know.
And I'm like, why are you even
Why are you
together? Like,
here?
I don't
Yeah.
under. But the graven image, of course, you think about it. I mean, the graven image is really what's happening here.
Hmm.
But everything gets so mangled. Like I'll hear it in Christian churches all the time. People say, well, the Bible says one of the 10 commandments. I'm like, well, there's 3 versions of commandments, but people don't usually know their Bible well enough to know that. 10's the most popular. But people will say it says, thou shalt not kill. I'm like, it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not murder.
Mm. Yeah.
There's a
Well,
difference
distinction.
there.
Yeah.
And you as a parent would know if somebody's coming after your family, and you're going to do everything you can to stay mindful. You're different. You and I, those of us that are seeking to be mindful, we're going to do our best to stay mindful while protecting our family. But if it came to that, that's just the way it is. If I had to, I would do it. Do I want to? I definitely would not want to. But that's not murder. That's
Mhm.
killing. And what I'm saying is just that idea alone is the understanding of how the slightest little shift in nuance
Mhm.
can change everything. You ever had a car where the headlights are out of whack and they're like pointing off to the way off to the right or something like that, and it's the middle of the night, or into everybody's face over here, on the other side of the road, and you can't see anything driving on the road, but everybody over here is honking at you because it's in their face. And that's kind of what we do. All of our stuff is so far out of alignment. It's obvious to everybody else, and we're completely in the dark. We're the blind leading the blind because we're looking outside of ourselves for something that isn't even there. There is no actual outside of you. What's outside of you is only what's obvious to you. Because what is manifestation? It's experiencing the obvious. And it's regardless of what you think, it's regardless of what you think you believe. What we experience is what we truly feel about a situation. Like if somebody comes up to me and says, how you doing? And you're like, oh, I'm doing good. But then in the back of your mind, actually, my back hurts. It's a little tight. My knee's been hurting.
Mhm.
That's what you really feel. And that's the seed of creative power, not the words you're spitting out. Not all. And does it have power? Yeah, but it's like 2% of a 100% iceberg. You shake that 2% loose with your cute affirmation or even a declaration of how good you feel, the 98% is going to shake with it. And Yeshua didn't say in Aramaic, you get everything you ask for. He said you get the entire thing
Mm.
that you ask for. Now, what's funny about that's wakul medum. It could also be translated as everything, but it doesn't mean everything you ask for in that sense. What he's really saying is the entirety of your being. Just because you're making a declaration of winning the lottery doesn't mean that 98% of your being is in line with it. So maybe we should learn how to bring the iceberg into the light rather than trying to convince it that it doesn't exist and shove it under the water, which is basically what most New Age and New Thought's doing. Bless their heart. I love them, but I don't mean it to sound like there's something, some sort of bad judgment, but unfortunately, I've been in the middle of both, and I love aspects of both, but there's certain things like it's kind of weird when someone will put the name secret on a book or a movie, but they never tell you what the secret is, because they actually, funny, because they actually shoplifted from a book called The Secret of the Ages that was published over 100 years ago that went into the public domain. And they took large tracts of that book and put a title on it, but they left the secret out. And it's not you become what you think about. It's actually the truth of the secret is you only experience what's obvious to you, regardless of what you think about. Because your thoughts aren't creating. What you feel is what's creating. That's a huge sea change that we're going to have to go through in consciousness for humans because of all this junk that's been sold to us for decades now about the lionization of thought. You know, but.
And it feels like the root of the whole thing, the foundation of the whole thing is realizing who you really are. That's like that's the game changer that shifts everything.
Yeah, but that's, yeah, how do I sell that to you? That's what's great about like I think of, you know, us, like, if we do an event together, the best parts are just
the
sitting
part, this
part
right here.
Or like you sitting in a chair riffing, or us toning, and you know, whatever that may be. It's just it's not the holding on. There's nothing wrong with holding on. I mean, if you're kind of, you know, certain physical situations, you want to hold on, but in a lot of situations, you know, the holding on is what causes further suffering, dragging us through the mud, when if we had just let go way back there, we'd be just fine. So,
you know that passage, you like the Gospel of Thomas, right? There's a passage where he talks about knowing yourself. And which part of it's in the canonical Gospels too. It's like, I wish I could read the whole quote, but it's basically like, you're not going to find it in here, you're not going to find it there, you know. When you know yourself, then you will be known.
Well, it's funny because, you know, he even, like in the Gospels, it'll say something like, if someone tells you, well, in some of the Gnostic stuff, it'll say, if someone tells you, or someone points to the kingdom, run, which is a nice way to put it, get the hell out of town. But if they say to you, it's in the sky, the birds will precede you. If they say to you, it's in the water, the fishes will precede you. And he's like, funny, because what it says in Arab, you know, we have this phrase, the kingdom of heaven is within, but that's actually not accurate from the Aramaic. The word in Aramaic means in your midst. What does that mean? Meaning that it's not just within, it's without, it's through, it's like threaded, like threads of a fiber of a carpet. And it's funny, there's a place in Thomas where he says, essentially, as you awaken, that the kingdom of the heavens will be rolled up in your presence. Well, that word rolled up in Coptic, kind of, you're thinking rolled up like sushi. What it actually means in Coptic is threaded through, basically threaded through your awareness. Basically, as you wake up, you'll realize, you know, wherever you go, there you are, John Kabat-Zinn, you know, or Be Here Now, Ram Dass. So there's so many, any great Alan Watts talk. But it's what Thomas is. It's funny. Thomas is just one of those texts that I have no idea how many thousands of times I've read it. But what's funny is people not knowing about the Bible or believing what the church tells them, they'll think that Gospel of Thomas was written by Thomas. Wrong. The word's didymus in Koine Greek. It's Thomas in Aramaic. And people think that means twin in the sense of a twin brother. What it really means is reflection, meaning that y'all are used to this version of Jesus. Well, we're going to give you a mirror image, a reflection that's going to go a lot deeper. And like a Zen koan or a parable, Episcopalian priest Cynthia Bourgeau, she said Yeshua's parables are meant to fry our sockets, you know, and that's what Thomas is there for. It's like the Course in Miracles. The people that study it and understand it don't have the slightest clue it's in the book. It's the ones that don't get it, don't understand it intellectually, but they're living it. Those are the ones that get it, you know. And I spent a lot of time with the Course in Miracles, and the whole time I had problems with its intellectuality. And then it was like this guy, Mitch, who was the guy who told me about Michael Rice 30 something years ago. Mitch was like, well, maybe it's because you're studying it. I'm like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing
I
between the
love that.
things? He's like, no. He's like, you're not supposed to memorize it and study it. He's like, just let it burn you down. Let it burn you
Nice.
to the ground. And I went,
Nice.
oh God, okay. But that was the value of Helen Schuckman being the channel of that, because she was, number one, she was an self-proclaimed atheist, although most people don't know what that means, but she was also very intellectual. So it
Uh-huh.
was able to come through in a kind of a very sort of black and white way. And it was just funny that I know people that I say, beware the blue book. I have friends here in Asheville that use like A Course in Miracles as this like weapon that they want to hit you with, like people do with the Bible. It's like, man, you're missing the point here. But anyway.
Let me read this quote here. And I know we got to wrap up then. Jesus said, if those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you and outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known.
So that when you take that from the original Coptic, it's
Mhm.
when you hear inside of you and outside of you, that's
Mhm.
two translations for one word.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Meaning that it's showing that it's inside and it's outside. Probably a better translation, like I say, would be it's everywhere present.
Mhm.
Or like I say, the word in Aramaic, the best way I could bring it through in a modern word would be like midst. It's a
Mhm.
potentiality
Mhm.
that's everywhere present, and yet again, it's not of the world,
Mhm.
which is funny. That's why I said I'm doing this like parables thing this Saturday on Zoom. And it's like that's when one of the disciples says to Yeshua, "Why do you always speak in parables?" He's like, "Well, to you it's given to see the kingdom. You know, I showed you how to awaken that, but to those outside, everything is in parable." And I think people think, "Oh, to those outside of discipleship or outside the apostles," but no. What he's saying is, to those that are still looking at the world, everything is coded, everything's a matrix, everything's a parable. So by me speaking in parables, no matter what level they're at, they're going to get something out of what I'm saying. Whereas if I give them a pure teaching, I can look at them like I can say what you're looking for is what is looking to 200 people, and I have bazillions of times, and most of the room goes,
Huh?
and then they'll come up and they'll say, "So you're saying what I'm looking for is what they're what I'm looking for is looking for me?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, "What about what you seek is seeking you?" And I'm like, "No, that's Rumi. Actually, that's not." And they're like, "What's the difference?" But yet there'll be a few people that just kind of, and those
Yeah.
are the ones that are paying attention, that are really there in the moment. And there's nothing good or bad in that. I can have people that come up and tell me that I am leading people into the pits of hell. And I had a girl like almost have an emotional breakdown when I was filming my DVD, The Word. This was like 15 years ago here in Asheville. And she was shaking. She was like, everything you said, it can't be true. And I said, and I'm like, why? She said, because if even a portion of what you said is true in there, I have nothing to stand on. Like everything I've built my life on is now gone. And people started talking, and there's a big group huddled around us. And I said, everybody, stop talking. And I looked at her and I'm like, are you breathing? And she's like, and she's literally sobbing. I'm like, I need you to just breathe. Just look in my eyes. Just, and she's shaking. She's literally shaking. Her body starts quaking. And which is funny. I mean, I grew up around Quaker churches. That's what they did. They got themselves into the place, and that's why they were called Quakers, not because of an oat company. But anyway, I had her, and you know, I said, "Can I hug you?" And I didn't give her this like squeezy Asheville hug where you break the people's back. You know, I just, and she pulled me. And then I found out like 2 years later, her mother, and I didn't know it was her daughter until 2 years later. I had known her mother for years, and her mother's like, I want to let you know that her child, Daniel Dale, was born. And I'm like, what? I'm like, that was your daughter? You know, she gave her child, you know, the middle name because she said, she was like, Dale, what you probably saw on your end was chaos and her basically falling apart. But she was like, that door opened. And I can't explain how much that shifted everything that I did in my life, not just the teaching, but just everything. Not because of the result, but realizing so long as I'm coming from that that true nature, you know, as you say, from that purity, everything's fine. Because now I'm birthing the world from that
And that's the answer
consciousness
to the
and
question.
awareness.
That's the answer to the question of what's the proper relationship with the world. As long as you're grounded in that true nature, everything will unfold perfectly beyond even what your mind thinks is the way it should be or shouldn't be.
Yeah, as opposed
Right?
to, I mean, I'm not saying there's something wrong with 30 bumper stickers, but, you know, conscious activism in the sense of Andrew Harvey, understanding that if you're fighting against something, you're literally rebuilding the wall that you're fighting against.
Yeah.
However, if you're able to hold people accountable from a place of presence and awareness and consciousness,
Yeah.
that's actually how the walls come down. And people are
Yeah.
starting to realize that now.
And that's a great way of knowing that you're not in this, you're not realizing your true nature is if you're in any kind of state of division, right? Or separation. Yeah. So we're in the timeless realm, but it is 1:27. So I think you have to go, right?
Yeah, I got a call with someone in Idaho who's
All right.
probably texting me saying, "Hey, where's my link?" Nope,
So
she's not. But
so we'll wrap up. Anything you want to just point people in a direction to plug into you
yeah,
more?
I'm easy to find. Go to Google and write Dale Aramaic. Uh, just Dale Allen Hoffman. DaleAllenHoffman.com is my website. AramaicMystic.com, MagdalenFire.com, AramaicToning.com. They all point in different directions. Find me on social media, YouTube, all that stuff. Um, Find me on that Facebook, whatever. I mean, I even put stuff on TikTok, but it's like throwing awareness into a cootie pit. It's like I put the video up and then I try to get out before I get any
Get out
on
of
me.
there fast.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the truth. But yeah, I'm easy to find all over the internet. So Dale Allen Hoffman. That's DaleAllenHoffman.
Love you, brother.
So
Thanks for
I
being
love you
you.
dearly.
Thanks, everybody.